Welcome to Engage and Secure, the podcast redefining the future of cybersecurity by focusing on its most critical element, people. Powered by Outthink, the world's first AI-driven human risk management platform, we bring you thought-provoking discussions with industry leaders, innovators, and experts. I'm your host, Fred Menachem. Welcome back to Engage and Secure, the podcast where we explore the minds shaping the future of cybersecurity. Of course, I'm your host, Fred Menachem, and today we have somebody very special. We're not only diving into one of our most meaningful conversations yet, but we're doing it with someone who's not only an outstanding professional, but also an outstanding human, one that we're all lucky to call a friend. Our guest today is the rare combination of technical depth and human clarity. A security leader who's not only shaped policy and culture inside institutions, but walked into the fire when global threats struck. He's one of the most grounded, strategic, and human centered leaders in security. He's also a great father with 4 kids, and one who's truly helped shape the way cybersecurity is taught, governed, and responded at the highest levels. From founding the University of Miami's first cybersecurity program to building strategic frameworks for Fortune 500s to advising national defense through Mandiant, Tim brings 30 plus years of high value wisdom to the table. He's a teacher, he's a builder, and he's a leader who believes security begins and ends with people. So, Tim, it's great to see you. It's great to have you on the show.
Wow, quite an intro, Fred. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, man. It's well deserved. And of course, joining us is someone who's built an entire company on the belief that we need to rethink human security. Flavius Plesu is the founder and CEO of Outthink. If you already didn't know that, you already know Flavius if you've been following this series. He's a former CISO who saw firsthand how broken security awareness training is. And instead of him just talking about, he built a company to fix it. Flavius, welcome back, brother. It's good to see you.
Hey, Fred, thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here today, and it's going to be a good conversation.
Of course.
Thank you for joining, Tim.
And your hair's looking good, by the way.
Thank you.
I'm jealous of all that hair. My old 50-something-year-old hair. But anyway, it's great to see you. And I got to say, I've been looking forward to this one for a long time, and I'm glad we finally got it together. And as Flavius and I know, Tim's heart, his intellect, and his integrity is so rare in today's world. And our audience is going to see that. And we're also surfacing some of the most compelling war stories our listeners have ever heard, which I think makes cybersecurity as palpable as it gets. And that I'm excited for. So this is a big one. And let's get started. So first of all, Tim, I know that you were, raised in Missouri, Irish American, family heritage, a lot of patriotism and a lot of emphasis on values and grit and really caring deeply about humans. And that's pretty much molded you, I think, right? In your personal and your career trajectory. But there was something that really made me understand how deeply important that was to you and what a story. Your grandfather, I know this was a great story, not I mean under a it wasn't under a tragedy, but he taught you about empathy over karma after a local tragedy. And I think this is so important that really speaks to who you are. Do you mind telling that story a bit?
No, certainly. In the early 70s, the farming community in Northwest Missouri, there was no such thing as workers' comp. If a farmer was injured, they had no one to rely upon except neighbors. So we had a neighbor where my grandfather lived. One day we were out, and the neighbor helped himself to one of my grandfather's hay balers. And when we got back, he had tried to put it back in the exact place that it had been in, and he had bent the front of the frame of it. And I was very angry. I was 8 years old on behalf of my grandfather. Time would pass, and eventually this neighbor had a terrible accident in the field. He had lost his arm, and my grandfather mobilized all of the other area farmers to take care of the family. It was a family of like 8, and they helped them get all of their crops out, and basically took over all the farming duties. And I asked my grandfather, "Grandpa, you know what this guy did to you? He's taken advantage of you. Why would you do this?" And he said, "Tim, don't be like that. Don't be like that. You need to step up whenever there's an opportunity to help others." And it's never left me. And so, yeah, Fred, whether it's been in cyber or it's been in other opportunities. My mother was like that. My father was like that. But my grandfather, he was a great example that I got the fortunate opportunity to spend a lot of time with growing up.
And I think that's a beautiful thing, by the way. I'll tell you something just on a personal note for a moment. There's one thing that I've always said, and I always say that when I help people, I don't do it for them, I do it for myself. And the reason why I say that, this might make a little more sense, because this is the perfect example. I'll never let somebody else's poison let me become them and stop me from helping people. And I think if that makes sense in a way, and I think that's sort of in a way what your grandfather taught you. I mean, of course it's about the other person, but for me that's always been key. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So, I know you transitioned from accounting and procurement into IT, which is so interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, cybersecurity, I think at that point was driven by curiosity and real world friction. Why don't you talk for a moment about, that's kind of a bit of a different trajectory that we usually hear.
No, Fred, I did not seek cybersecurity. It
Right.
found me in a very circuitous way. So in the mid 90s, I left IT telecommunications at the University of Miami to go into the procurement area, and everything was paper. The bills were paper, the invoices, the payment, everything was paper. And I saw a lot of opportunity with that. And after implementing web-based procurement with Ariba, after implementing EDI to get rid of the paper and getting a lot of discounts, I'd earned a bit of a reputation as a deal maker. And when I tried to get FedEx to lower their prices, they said we could do 3 to 5%. But Tim, have you ever heard of this EDI? We can send you the invoices electronically, and you can pay us electronically, and we can give you the remittance advice back electronically. We can knock out hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it opened my eyes to the world of electronic data interchange. Then came web-based procurement and the P card. It caught the attention of the CIO during the dot-com era. The AVP over computer network services had left to go to find his fortune at cbssportsline.com and then WebMD and then MCI. Well, no one could agree on who the successor for him should be because they wanted him, whoever or her, who it would be, to be the successor for the CIO. And after 2 years of failed search, I said, why not me? And I threw my hat in the ring and I got the job. And this was the year 2000, just after Y2K. And what came with the 180 people that reported to this AVP over infrastructure were 4 people in a dark room doing mainframe RACF security. And that would become my role. So I was thinking about the data centers. I was thinking about the help desk, telecommunications, the telephone switches. We were running our own telco. We had 7 Nortel switches. But it was that security role that we had over here. We had firewalls basically under the network group. We had Symantec that was being run by our desktop endpoint people, but it wasn't a program. It was just a bunch of disparate people doing things,
Right.
and we did not call it cyber. I think at the best we called information security.
Right.
And that company you may remember that went down with Enron, Arthur Anderson,
How
they
can
had
I forget?
yeah, and Arthur Anderson had done a complete network study, and basically we came back with a set of recommendations that built the foundation for the entire cyber program. We were also fortunate that the author of HIPAA, Dr. Donna Shalala, left the Clinton administration and became our president.
She lives in
And
my mom's building, by the way. I see her all the time.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So so we meet, right? And she goes, Tim, I see you're running infrastructure, but you have a CISSP. In the Big Ten, where she had come from before being in the Clinton
Right.
administration in Wisconsin, she goes, we have these things called CISOs. Maybe you've heard of them. And poof, you're it. And by the way, you get to be our HIPAA security officer. And so that was how security found me from procurement.
By the way, I think Donna really changed a lot when she went to UM. It's fascinating how she really took that university to a different level. And I think Flavius could relate to this, right? Flavius, I mean, Flavius, I think it's interesting how nobody, back then, you pioneers in the industry kind of fell into it. I mean, Flavius, think of it, grew up in communist Romania, police officer. I mean, you did so much. Flavius, you kind of had a trajectory that was a bit different as well, right?
Well, yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about cybersecurity growing up. I did like computers, like Tim did, I
Right.
guess. I was having fun. I was coding a bit, but then I needed a job, and I went to work with computers, building. Actually, I was building websites when I was 17. That was my first job, building websites, and
In
then
communist Romania, sorry to interrupt you, right, just to be clear, right, this was not you weren't
no,
growing
I
up
wish.
in the
No, not
West.
quite that old.
Oh, not yet?
No, there
Okay.
wasn't anymore by
That's
then.
right, but it was still right, it was still, changing dramatically.
That was 1998, 99. And so I worked for this internet service provider. I was doing websites, and then next to me there was a colleague, and he was managing firewall rules, and I thought that was really interesting. So I started looking over. Eventually, he asked me to help look at certain logs, and before you know it, I was managing firewall rules, and then people got me to help set up some small networks. I came across Backtrack and some of those Kali Linux tools, and I started doing pen testing. So yeah, that was it. I wasn't thinking cybersecurity, as Tim says. It wasn't even called cyber back then. If anything, maybe IT security. Um, and it wasn't a real thing. Like I remember a web server would go down, and some customers would start phoning in, and we would reboot, and we'd be back at some point, and no big damage done. But look at what's happening today. There's a lot of damage scattered, spiders doing all over the world. In the UK, one of the largest retailers, I think the total cost last I've heard is getting close to $500 million. Right? So things have certainly changed a lot over the last 20, 25 years. So yeah.
Well, I know we have so much to talk about, so I want to go through just a couple things because I think this is so important. I grew up in Miami, so watching I just mentioned Don Australia, but watching the University of Miami, really move to the next level from technological perspective, and you're a bit of a teacher, Tim. I mean, you built the University of Miami's first cybersecurity program, and I don't want to embarrass you, give you all these accolades, but we're very proud of you here in this community, and you were twice nominated for Adjunct Professor of the Year. It's pretty cool, right?
Well, yes, it was faculty member of the year, but what happened was you're not eligible to be selected unless you're tenure track. But I was so proud that my students took it upon themselves to nominate me in back-to-back semesters while I was there. So yes, while CISO, I was teaching at the undergraduate and graduate level, and then wrote the curriculum for the master's in cybersecurity in the engineering school.
So, because I want to move to the next section, and I never have time to go through everything, but of course this is the first of many. But I do want to ask a question because I think it's so important. Before Mandiant, before ChenMed, before World Fuel, right? Before the boardrooms, man. What do you think formed you? And I say, in your early life, what did you learn to manage risk, both from a career perspective, also from a personal perspective? I mean, how did that manifest itself?
Well, it's probably a compilation of a lot of things, but one of the things that I lived and breathed growing up was baseball. And I was a middle relief pitcher in college at Florida International University. And but during high school, I would be the one to come in when everything was on fire, very much like an incident response. There would be people on base. The opposing crowd was into it and yelling, and it was intimidating. But basically, the idea of coming into a situation that is challenging and difficult and trying to turn it around was something that was very familiar to me. And I find a lot of experiences growing up, um, watching my family deal with hard situations,
Hmm.
jumping in for other people, jumping into situations where I felt like that's wrong, that shouldn't be. I've been kind of the defender protector most of my life in whatever circumstances I found myself.
You know, I do want to ask you one more question here, and then I want to move on to something. But one thing that you always believe in, and I learned this a lot about you. First of all, you're calm under pressure, and you really care. But you believe deeply in repetition, at bats, and cyber is a contact sport. You once told me, practice and pressure are key to growth. Can you just talk about that for a moment?
Oh, absolutely. that's one of the things that I try to stress with people who are trying to use compliance as a surrogate for security, but have never really been in an actual fight, or who think that by filling out a questionnaire or doing something with check the box, they're going to be okay. You actually have to get in the ring. You actually have to get in at bat to get better at security. And the more times you do it, the better you get at it. And so when I talk to a CISO who's battling a threat actor like, say, Scattered Spider or Black Cat, and they see Mandiant's incident responders respond, and they go, were they able? What are you, prophets? How did you know what software to look for? How did you know what logs to look for? And they're amazed. And in a very humble way, most of our engagement leads will say, look, we've gone up against them 400 times in the last quarter. Of course, we're going to know what to do. It's a matter of repetitions. And so that's the one thing that I think new people trying to break into cyber struggle with, because they have probably more certifications than many of the Mandiant people, but they don't have the same number of repetitions. And that's what builds muscle memory.
By the way, I think Flavius can relate to this because early in his life, even personally, when they said, he was terrible at basketball, this and that. And I know there's a whole thing, but Flavius, you certainly, right? You did repetition, you refused to give up, and you became one of the best basketball players.
Absolutely, I can relate to that. It's all about those reps, getting those reps in. You can read books, great books about basketball, about baseball, you name it. Man, you gotta be there. You gotta get those reps in, and then as Tim said, you have muscle memory. You know exactly what to do, and when the pressure's on, you don't have time to go through the manual and
Right.
figure out what to do. You get in and you take action, and you reduce damage, and you save reputation, and you save lots of money. So I'm sure with what's happening right now in the world, not just CISOs, but I'm sure many CEOs and chairmen would love to have Tim on a speed dial.
And by the way, you once said something to me about sometimes you got to get like in the back. You were talking about early on in your life, you got to get beat up, right, and pull yourself back up in order to build success. And in basketball, you didn't let
Yeah,
anybody knock you down, right, man? That was always and in life.
yeah, yeah. I think I got to this point. I believe adversity is a gift,
Yep.
and I think Mike Tyson said this very well. He who is not humble, life will bring adversity and humility, upon himself. And well, he said the other thing about you have a game plan and then you get punched in the
Then you
face.
get punched in the face, right?
That's
Exactly. I
right.
love that one. I ran into
No,
him
absolutely.
not
Adversity
too
is a
long.
gift. It forces you to go find solutions. It just put up with it. Do the reps. Take the pain. You're gonna go stronger, smarter. You're gonna build that muscle memory. There's as far as I know, there's no other way to
Yeah.
build that strength, that resilience as well.
I think, by the way, the three of us know a lot about adversity, and I think also, it's made us. We do, and that's not I'm
Yeah,
proud of
well,
that. I mean, I wish I didn't have as much, but I'm certainly proud of it. But I got to tell you something. Now we're warmed up, man. I am excited about this. I want to get into the meat of it. The world of incident response, and you know, you've seen the worst days, Tim. I'm really excited about this at some of the world's most important organizations. Help us picture the incident response world and what's it like, when you're called in at the moment of crisis. And then I want to kind of get into the three different types of you know hacker archetypes because it's really fascinating.
Yes, it is. Well, Fred, one of the incidents I wanted to start off with was just as I was starting at Mandiant, um, February of 2022, the call
Hmm.
came in from Ukraine, uh, and Ukraine was under attack militarily, but it was also cyber, and that was the beginning stages. It was very cold winter. It was the Russian hypothesis that if they could turn off the electricity, they could turn off the heat, they could shut off the stoplights, they could stop E911, they could stop all public services, they could demoralize the Ukrainian people to the point that they would just give up because it was essentially over. And one of the things that call resulted in to Mandiant, among others, but 300 people at Mandiant around the world assembled, and around the clock, 7 by 24, were finding the attacker, ejecting the attacker, restoring operations everywhere that Russia was going. We were beating them back, actually, and even in cities where the network was partially controlled by the Russians and partially controlled by the Ukrainians, we at least could battle to stalemate and prevent them from being able to make further incursions. And if they could turn the electricity off, they couldn't keep it off. And so this was a real tribute to the fighting spirit. And President Zelensky had some amazing things to say about Kevin Mandia as a result of that. And, I was able to observe that from across continents. We had people around the globe who were stepping up. And that's the other thing. Cyber is not just a contact sport, it's a team sport.
That's very important, right? I mean, let me ask you something though, because I know a bit about national security, to say the least, and you were, I mean, this was not just, I mean, solo to Mandy. You had to be involved from a national security perspective, right? You were dealing with a lot of government without getting into all the details, but this was not a solo thing, right? You guys had to really engage with kind of big agencies. Let me say that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it was many countries that were involved. It was NATO. There was a lot of other parties involved, but no, it's a real tribute to how if you unite around a cause and you stay focused on the threat actor, you can be successful. And now today, 2025, you don't hear about cyber attacks. It's about drones, running out of munitions, but you don't hear about the power shut off and what a cold winter it was in 23, 24, 25.
I do have an interesting question, and I want to go through a couple more different kinds of attacks, but that kind of attack, I feel like the private sector sometimes has more experience than the U.S. government, for example, and I think there has to be really, I mean, I think there has to be a strong alliance, right, between one of my point is between the private sector and national security, and was there a lot of that like happening at the time? Was there a lot of working together on that issue because it affected the U.S. too? I mean, there was a lot of hacking attacks here, and
absolutely. No, there most certainly is. And I do think that that's a very good example of private-public cooperation and knowledge sharing. And I think CISA has really come a long ways
right
in helping inform. Even back in 2016, when I was at World Fuel, I would regularly get hey, heads up, Tim, this is what's going on in your area. This is what's happening with aviation or what's happening in the marine or land fuel logistics arena. And it was wonderful, with no strings attached. That wasn't something I think. Certainly, when I started cyber back in 2000, that wasn't the way it was working. And if it did, it was very clumsy.
So, by the way, I'm excited about one thing. We're actually going to have, Flavius, we're going to have a roundtable we're going to do on human risk with one of the guests is going to be Camille Stewart Gloucester, who, was at the White House. So I think we'll really be able to get deeper into those kind of things. But Tim, I kind of, and Flavius, please join in here, but I kind of want to set the stage in a sense for, we talked about nation state actors, right? Geopolitically motivated, but then there's fin motivated attackers and ideological motivated groups. I don't know for a moment if you can just like simply explain, there are some folks who listen to this that may not have, as much knowledge, and then get into some of those things because there's been healthcare breaches. We're talking about walk-in case scenarios. So I'll let you, and Flavius, of course, has some things to talk about here as well, I'm sure.
Right. So Fin is that's one segment of the threat actor market. We track about 4,000 threat actor groups. Some of them, because we have this strict policy that if we can't really decide on attribution, who they are, we start up with UNC, as stands for short unclassified. We're not sure who it is, but we kind of know what they're doing. Actually, that's what you would think of as scattered spider, UNC 3944. We're getting, some interesting ideas about who they are. There were 4 arrests this week in UK that were attributed to Harrods and some of the other hacks that were attributed to scattered spider. But then the APTs that you mentioned, and there are really 4. That's Iran, Russia, North Korea, and China. And so the APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threats. And think geopolitical.
Yeah,
China doesn't want our money. Okay, North Korea may, but Iran doesn't really want our money. They're not doing the ransomware attacks. They want to know what the next biotech drug is. What's the next
right.
AI algorithm? What's the next quantum
Who
chip?
does, Iran or China? Because
China does.
China, of course,
China
right?
does.
That's
Yeah,
their right,
they're playing the
right.
long game, the
Yep.
1,000-year war.
And they're doing it well, by the way. Unfortunately, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. The
yeah,
next plane, the next train, the next EV battery. What's that going to be about? That's what they care about. But then the other group that you mentioned is the ideological motivated group, the hacktivist extremists. That could basically, be any one of a number of groups that isn't really affiliated with a nation state but have a cause. We
the
don't
most
really,
dangerous, by the way, because they don't care. They're not giving data back, right? It's in a sense,
well,
there's no
no,
negotiation there. They're just taking it,
right. And I don't want to take a position one way or the other on
right?
whether anonymous is a positive
Right,
ideological group or not, but they have typically, been on the the side of what they consider to be righteous and appropriate, and they will fight for what they think is right, even if it's speaking truth to power or to a corporation that they think deserves to be punished for some
right,
behavior. But the thing about that group is they're probably not all going to be the getting the headlines that you're reading about, like the APTs and the fin actors with the big financial payouts who are encrypting all of a company's systems and then asking for a ransom. That's what's really captured the headlines right now. And as Flavius was saying about Scattered Spider, which is the name that CrowdStrike calls them, Mandiant calls them Monk 3944, Palo, and others have a different name for them. We're trying to work together there, so to come together with some nomenclature we can all agree upon. But the point is, we're generally on point about what they do in terms of their TTPs, their tactics, techniques, and procedures, and the indicators of compromise. And as we share that, we are getting better as a community.
I think, and maybe I'm sorry. No,
Right.
Flavius, please go ahead because you were talking about some of those attacks. No, please go ahead.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Great points being made there. And this morning I had coffee with a CISO from financial services, large organization, financial services in New York. He said to me he has unlimited budget for cybersecurity. I know it's not that common,
Right.
but this CISO said he has unlimited budget. The company has revenue to billions of dollars. I'm trying not to say too much about
Tim, there's some good
people.
business here. Flavius, right? I want to meet this guy, by the way. Right.
Well, I'll introduce you, but I
Right.
just don't want to get
Right.
on
Right.
podcast. The interesting thing, so he has the ear of the CEO, the chairman, and the owner, and that's a family, and who own that business, and they're all interested in cyber. And so on the one hand, and perhaps that's a bit extreme, the top execs are interested in cyber. They give the CISO unlimited budgets. Go fix this for us. That's an extreme. At the other end of the spectrum, what we have is perhaps universities, and we've touched on that. I happened to work for a university at some point around, I think it was 2017, 2018, and University of West London. And unlimited budget is exactly what we didn't have. And
Of course.
right. And the point Tim was making there, threat actors, like China, nation state, they are really, really after that intellectual property. And I believe it was around 2020, 2021, perhaps in the UK, we have Queen's University. They had a serious attack. As far as we know, it came from China. They just wanted to get the IP. No ransomware, no nothing, just the IP. And then these universities, we work with some of them. They really struggle for security budget. They
Right.
have a lot of super valuable IP, and they're up against nation state adversaries. It probably that's probably the top game to play in cyber. It doesn't get easier. Well, it doesn't get harder, right? And so I don't know, team. We try to help as much as we can. Obviously, our focus as a company is on making people more cyber resilient, strengthening the human layer. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts and advice for those companies who are not on an unlimited budget. Specifically those universities, they carry a lot of IP,
Yep.
a lot of research.
No, Flavius, that's a great point, and I would put in that same group rural healthcare, because in the middle
Okay.
of rural America, you can't really get security talent to move there, and it's an issue, and Google is trying to step in there to help where they can, but unless you're going to have your entire security team be remote, and the price tag of that, you end up finding in a lot of these rural hospitals the IT staff is trying to double as the security team, and with little or no training and limited budgets and tools. So universities, yeah, saw that at University of Miami, but there's a big, once you get past the U.S. News and World Report, there's a lot of universities that don't have a CISO or a dedicated security team, and it's really challenging. So, no, those are valid points, and I think it's a call for our community, the cyber community, to actually pull them in, because though that is a hotbed of our innovation, is
Absolutely.
and
And
healthcare. I mean, come on, that's people, those are lives. We have to take care of them. I mean, how would any of us feel if one of our loved ones was unable to get care because the
of course,
the healthcare system was
yeah.
completely encrypted?
Actually, it's a good point. And then I want to go to some of the war stories, man, because I know you have great ones. But what I wanted to say was that, and I think, Flavius, with what you're doing in Outthink and then all the R&D, right, as well, I think in situations like that, Tim, where you have, you have cybersecurity departments merge with IT departments, and really, they're the ones who really need that kind of training, because that's very right, Flavius. I mean, you deal with a lot of that type of stuff, I imagine.
We work with healthcare a lot, with universities, with healthcare, and things are very, very different. On the one hand, you have financial services and banking, and then, as Tim said, the healthcare as well, not just the universities. And in the UK, we had the NHS cyber attack. I don't think it made it in the news. The attribution is always a bit tricky, but I guarantee you there was loss of human life there. When those people couldn't
Yep.
get critical care, when the network, the computers, the devices were down, I guarantee you that there was some serious damage being done there. So it's fascinating. I saw cyber over the past 25 years go from, hey, web server goes down, some calls to the call center, some customers complaining, not a big deal, to hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars in losses and loss of human life. And so I naturally wonder, what next? Are we going to see, is there going to be a cyber 9/11, or what's going to happen next?
Well, that's going to be, Tim Romer, when he's on the podcast, we were talking about it. Right now they're taking little hits, right? That's what kind of the mentality. But at some point they're going to take a big one. But what I want to do now is, I don't know, because I love this stuff, man. Tim, what's the biggest war story you have? And I know you got a million of them. Wish we could talk about all of them, but in the cyber apparatus.
Well, there are a lot of them, Fred, and just coming off the July 4th weekend here, it was a very busy weekend for Mandiant. And it started while I was here in DC watching the fireworks. My phone started blowing up, and, from all parts across the globe. I cannot talk about that. But what I can talk about in the generic is the particular healthcare org that I walked through a very awful encounter with Black Hat, which they had achieved a foothold on a part of their organization and encrypted them, and were holding them hostage. But it was, they reached out to the CEO with a ransom note. They actually called the CEO, but the CEO's wife answered it, and it was one of those garbled voices that she could make out. That was, and it was very frightening. She was terrified. We ended up deploying our incident response team. We're able to contain and not let the entire healthcare system compromise patient care, which was great. There was one clinic that had to be rebuilt, but the early days were very confusing. I call it the fog of war period,
Right.
where you have very limited information, like you have 20 to 30% of the facts, and you have higher ups absolutely pounding on tables, wanting answers,
Right.
wanting to know how long this is going to go on. Very concerned from a legal liability standpoint, very concerned about how to talk to patients, how to let families know what's going on. The employees wanting to be aware, is my employer going to make it? I would say that if Gartner has good data on this, the percent of your IT budget being spent on security in healthcare historically, it's been 6% or less. In the financial services area, where Flavius is talking about, it's triple that. It's normally north of 15, 16%. It may be even higher now, which I think says a lot about where we prioritize security for taking care of people versus our money. But back to the story, we were able to actually, when we logged in, we saw the attacker in the systems. It was remarkable. It was heart stopping to see them in there. Normally, you see the effects of it, but to see them moving around, it was a moment. But we ejected them, and they returned. So we knew that there was persistence there that we needed to ferret out. Ultimately, we were successful. The healthcare organization did not want to pay. Legal counsel was involved. Negotiator bought us a lot of time. How are you sure you have?
And the FBI is always involved because I know a lot about this, right? They have
Yeah.
to get, yeah.
They were, and they're very good. Well, this was actually an ex-FBI person who turned
Right.
private negotiator, and he knew a lot of the questions asked. Sometimes when you look on the dark web and somebody says they have your data, what they have is a picture of it. It's not the actual data. So you can say, "Oh, I see that you have a JPEG there, but could we see actual more evidence?" And then that can play out. And okay. So I see that you have this. You have 100 records, but you say you have 1,000. Could we see some more evidence that it's really bigger than what? And what exactly do you have? In this particular case, it was pretty awful data, and there was not a uniform opinion about whether it was worth paying the ransom to keep that data from being exposed. There was actually, believe it or not, there is some honor among thieves. There were cyber criminals telling the threat actor, "You guys suck. You just, this is not the way to make money," which I found like, whoa, that's kind of interesting to see one of their own saying that there's a line you crossed. But at the end of the day, not that the money was the biggest factor, but being able to successfully navigate through that, helping them be able to isolate to contain the radius of the blast, so that it was just at this particular clinic, not the whole operation, to be able to avoid paying the ransom. That was, I felt like, an amazing win. And to this day, the administration of that organization is very, very grateful and proud. I had the fortunate opportunity to meet the C-levels, and they said, "Tim, you guys you're not vendors, you're partners."
That's amazing. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
Oh, so we have to move on to the next segment because there's so much going to talk about. But I did have a couple things to say. And it's interesting. So my friend Fred Karlinski, Greenberg Trarg, he's an attorney that deals with a lot of this, and he said the same thing about honor among thieves. He said, "Listen, they return the data, But my question is, not my question is the FBI always has to agree that they can pay the ransom, right? That's what he told me, that they're always involved and they have to. Is that not? You didn't have that experience?
The FBI person I'm speaking of is ex-FBI, and he was a
Right.
negotiator. But typically, the attorney, if there is going to be a ransomware payment, most of the outside counsels have the resources to be able to pay in crypto. And even CFOs who are very seasoned, making a crypto payment that's secure and
Right, exactly.
that's not something they traffic in every day, and so there are services that do that. And that's another thing. It's talking about a team sport. We were just working the investigation. There was there was the cyber insurance, the broker for the cyber insurance, the outside counsel, the negotiator, the public relations firm, the HR working with the employees, the board. There were so many different stakeholders to consider. It wasn't just the Mandiant show, and that's one thing I see when you get pulled together a bunch of people that normally don't work together. It can be a Keystone Cop moment, and so it is worth having tabletop exercises just to get people to learn to play together.
So
Hey,
I don't mean to cut. Oh, sorry, Flavius. If I never get to this next section, I'm gonna. Okay, go ahead, please.
be quick, I promise. Just before we move on, because Tim, I remember when we met in Miami a couple of months ago. I think it was. You shared a very interesting story, and if you could just share that here as well, I thought that was very powerful. When they got to the CEO and they told the CEO, "We know where your son goes to school. We know about your family," and the CEO's reaction was, "Yeah, I love my job, but I love my family even more, and I shouldn't have to go through this."
Yeah.
I thought that was.
No, Flavius, that's scattered. They are into severe intimidation. There's a number of people at Mandiant call them the ATP teen group because they act like angsty teens, but they love to turn up the pressure and intimidate people. They will call the CEO's wife or the CEO and say, "Yeah, I know where your children go to school." They will call up your Active Directory administrator and say, "Hey, I know all about you. Are you sure are you sure you want to stay at this employer?" They will try to intimidate. They'll send flowers to the CIO. They'll just to let them know they're there. Actually, if they do get domain admin from the administrator account to be able to control all the systems, and they know that you're having an incident response call, they've been known to join the call, break in, and say, "We hear you. We're here with you." It's just all to turn up the
So
pressure. But you're right. They will try to make you feel like, man, is this really worth it?
So I want to do a rapid fire thing now, but I do want to say one thing though. Why can't we just destabilize crypto? So then when they get paid, then it's not worth it for them anymore. It's just that was a creative idea I've always had. I mean, that's another conversation. But if you do that, then, if you destabilize every ability for them to get payment, I'm serious. Then all of a sudden it becomes much more complicated. But anyhow, we'll talk about that more in the future. I don't know. Is that a crazy idea? It's my out of the box thinking, but sorry, you want to make a quick comment? We have to get through another section, but am I insane? Maybe a little, but maybe.
Destabilize the entire crypto industry.
Yeah, and then right, yeah, and then they can't. Then they have to find another way to get paid. I don't know. It's always a thought that I had, but let's do rapid fire because I know we only have a few more minutes. So, you've said this, Tim, and we're going to do rapid fire here. And I want Flavius to 3 questions. So you've said that no one's immune to disruption. So how do you actually build resilience at scale? So Tim and Flavius, maybe a quick answer to that, and then we'll go to the next question.
Muscle memory, practice, practice, practice.
Repetition, man.
Repetition. Do the chaos gorilla, chaos monkey that you see at
Chaos monkey, I love it.
Yeah. Well, try to break your own systems. That's the only way you know. Can you?
Well, Flavius knows. I'm sorry to interrupt. Flavius knows a bit about breaking their own systems, right? In training.
A bit, yeah. But for us, it's really engage your people, make them part of it. I was having a debate with a technical CISO recently, and we finally agreed on this. There's just no way. No matter how good your technology is, there's just no way you're gonna make your organization cyber resilient if you're not gonna engage your people. You just gotta engage your people. You gotta find a way. Not easy, but you gotta do it.
So Tim said something once, which I think was great. You talked about, culture is the real firewall. So that phrase means a lot to you, Tim. What does that mean?
Well, so your people, Bruce Schneier, who may be the closest thing we have to a rock star in cybersecurity, says it this way: amateurs hack systems, professionals hack people. They're going to find their way in. Actually, if you watch what Scattered Spider is doing, they're just leveraging their brilliant understanding of American culture and British culture and
Right.
their impeccable English skills to call up the help desk and talk them out of an MFA reset or a password reset. That's where it's all starting. And yes, it does get more technical after that, but they're building trust with someone and applying pressure, and that's where it all begins. So Flavius is exactly right. It's the people, and they will find the weak link. And it's always been that way, no matter what era, even pre-computing. That it's about the social engineering. We as a species are not well designed to detect that and respond to it. But if you can be warned, then you have a fighting chance.
And it's funny because last time I'm gonna go the last rapid fire question. When we were all together, we had a great dinner in Florida, and it was so much fun. But you had mentioned, Outthink and some of the work they were doing in relation to some of that.
Oh yeah, no, I think that on the human risk, I don't. Not everybody is equally uh, at risk from an attack. And I think what I see Flavius doing, he's on the cusp of opening up for the C-levels minds to see exactly where the if you just do a general training every year for everybody, it's like a Model T that doesn't work for anyone. But when you know that it's accounts payable that's going to get the business email compromised phishing emails, when you know it's the CEO's executive assistant who's going to get the phishing emails and she has access to the CEO's email, when you know that your general counsel is the one that's going to get these lawsuits, therein lies the hack. It's like, I got you, and I didn't have to go strength for strength against your strongest people.
So I wanted to ask Tim a question. Of course, Flavius, you have a lot to say here. So, such an important question. Where do people or humans factor into incident response? If they took it seriously, I mean, it could save them a world of pain or prepare them to weather what could happen most. I mean, we've always spoken about this, so I think it's a great thing to talk about. Great
No,
topic.
Fred, it really is, because the majority of the time, and there's statistics out there that 94, 92, 93, whichever metric you want to use, it's north of 90% of all the attacks do start with some type of phishing compromise. It's not some technical malware all the time, although we do see that at Mandiant. But the thing of it is, the threat actors are logging in. They look like part of the community. Where did they get those credentials? They are calling up the help desk. They are impersonating the person. They have looked on their Facebook. They know that they're whitewater rafting out in the Rockies. They're unlikely to be paying attention looking at their phone. They're calling up the help desk saying, I need to do an MFA password reset, or I dropped my phone in the water. I'm under pressure to meet a deadline. The help desk, the word help is in help desk, and they want to be helpful, too helpful sometimes, and they will go ahead and do the password reset. And from that point on, the threat actor is in. And that happens all the time, particularly.
Tim, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'll tell you just a quick story on that. So I'm not going to mention which university it was or anything, but I called on behalf of my nephew the other day, and I'm not his proxy, right? I'm not his that, and I even told them, that I gave them my name and whatever, and I don't know the relationship, but I did mention the press. But anyway, regardless of that, they just gave me the information.
Yeah.
And if I was, I mean, that's exactly what if I was. I mean, that's a student, and so easily.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
that's I mean, I wasn't hacking anybody, but, it's scary.
No, I'm sure that everyone has been in a situation where they feel like, oh my gosh, I know the rules, but this person sounds like really they're in trouble. I mean, how did I start off this podcast talking about how I want to help people? I think generally
Right.
people want to be helpful, and when they're disarmed and the story sounds compelling and well thought out, and they actually seem to know some things that are publicly available, by the way, it there's no time to really validate. And boy, you don't want to be the one that gets the CEO or the CFO upset because you were being a stickler for details. And there you go. You've been pwned.
Yep.
Absolutely. That's exactly how it happened. Team, you're saying in excess of 90%. Well, absolutely. In the UK, we have the Information Commissioner's Office there, and the last one I saw from them, I think it was around 92, 93%. So only in 7% of cases, someone brute forced their way in. through just technical vulnerabilities. 92, 93%, they gathered that information, they impersonated an exec, and that's how they got to bypass MFA authentication. And what's really interesting is not only we give a lot away, our digital footprint, we do put a lot of information out there on social networks, but also what we see happens in organizations, typically the security team will have more control around the VIPs, the CXOs, those accounts. And those accounts might be secure initially, but what cyber criminals do is they do their homework. They see who's likely to be working closely together, and there's likely to be a trust relationship, and they exploit that. They might go after an EA. They might go after someone that works closely with an exec. Once they're in their inbox, there's a lot of information around how they communicate, what sort of projects they're working on currently, and then it's really easy to make that phone to the help desk, and boom, you've bypassed security tools, you've bypassed MFA. So
Yep.
I think there's both the real danger that those human vulnerabilities are being exploited right now, but I'm positive. So I think there's a massive opportunity for us in cybersecurity to really address that vulnerability.
So, guys, there you go. You guys have heard it. So, work with Flavius and Althing to avoid a world of pain. But if you do end up in the hard end of it, Tim and Mandiant is the equivalent of Black Ops and the team you want there when you really need it. Especially Tim. You want Tim there. And Flavius, of course, but depending on the circumstance, right? So, anyway. So, there's so much I wanted to get through today. We never do, but we're going to do this again. But let me ask one last question, and then we'll kind of wrap up. Because Tim, based on everything you've lived, I mean, and the thing that's, the fact that you're a teacher and all that, is something that I've always respected. But educating the next generation and leading through the highest stake breaches, and I'll say almost done building programs from scratch. So, if you could give one piece of advice to every company out there, I guess, what would that be? And kind of you can mold in that question a bit. Do you see hope for the future in cyber? What is that hope, and is there some positivity that's coming from from companies in general?
Oh, I do. AI is being the term overused, and people on both the threat actor side and the defender side are going to use it. But Phil Venables and Kevin Mandy have gone on the record as saying it tends to favor the defender because you have home field advantage. But here's the advice I would give. You are the company you keep. And I said that earlier when we were getting started, Fred, but you truly need to elevate the quality and the caliber and the level of the talent around you to know what the real health and state of your program is. It's not something that you want to wing it or do your own self-assessment. You need people around you that will call you out.
And by the way, Tim, you said you're the company you keep. What does that say about me, man? You got to hang out with me. What is that? I don't know.
Oh, Fred, it says the best about you.
You're a great guy, man. I love you, Tim. So I don't know if you want to fly in there real quick, Flavius, because we are at time, and I just want to see if there's Flavius. You want to why don't you add anything before we close, and then Tim.
That's just one thing. And again, I've been learning this from some of the CISOs we support. Lead with the positive and the good news. I guarantee you, your board, your CEO, your execs have a lot on. In this industry, we've been using a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt to get budget and get the attention. The best CISOs we see, including the ones with unlimited budget for security, they lead with the positive, with the good news. And so
I'm sorry I interrupted. So, okay, we're almost done here, but I want to ask one thing. So, Tim, if you could reflect and just give a message, with gravity, anything personal, practical, philosophical, or both. What do you want to leave us with?
Well, two things. One, what Flavius just said. I interviewed a gentleman yesterday from Singapore, and he said the same thing. He said, Tim, I teach CISOs, don't lead with fear, lead with confidence. That was the word that would go along with what you were saying, Flavius. The other thing is just the saying of, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go as a team. I think we all have our blind spots.
Right.
And going along with you are the company you keep, you need to surround yourself for the long haul, for the overarching period of your career, with people that have your back and that will tell you the truth, even if it hurts. Much like a little, incident response. Sometimes, we don't see ourselves, and that's the only
Right.
way to get better.
And
And I wish there was a compression algorithm for learning, but it's really scars.
and right, and getting beat up a bit. I will say this, it's hard sometimes because, like, for example, I move really fast, and sometimes you gotta remember, I don't know everything, right? You gotta have a team.
Yeah.
So I think that's always a challenge. But listen, guys, I think this has been a great podcast. We didn't get a chance to talk about all the things I would have liked to, but this is the first of many. And thank you both so much for joining. Obviously, Flavius is, of course, if anybody remembers, the CEO and founder of Outthink, and Tim. Tim, what's your exact title? Because we never even said it. So
Yeah, managing director, senior client advisor.
right. So Tim's been through the ringer, man. And thank you, by the way, for what you both do. And that's right, man. Pound. Let's do some pounds, man. Can we do that? I hope to see you. And Tim's always so busy, right? Exactly. He's promised every time there's some incident response, we're gonna go out, we're gonna have dinner with Eugenio as well. My friend, a business partner, and it never happens, man. Always something coming up. So I'm gonna hold you to that soon. In the meantime, thank you both. Of course, this is the Engage and Secure podcast brought to you by Outthink. Of course, I'm your host, Fred Menachem. And until next time, stay secure, stay ahead, and stay inspired. Great to see everyone. Thank you both again.
Thank you,
Thank
Fred.
you.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you for joining us on Engage and Secure, where conversations inspire action and collaboration drives innovation. Powered by Outthink, we're dedicated to transforming how leaders address cyber-human risk, paving the way for a safer digital future. Don't miss our upcoming episodes and roundtable conversations with industry trailblazers. Subscribe, share, and join us as we redefine what's possible in cybersecurity. Until next time, stay secure and stay inspired.